New and growing questions around the Mar-a-Lago raid more than a week after the unprecedented search, from what was really seized to why the raid was necessary in the first place. And this is sparking new calls for transparency. But the DOJ is not on board with one big part of it. This is Outnumbered. Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno, here with my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany. And also joining us today, Cheryl Casoni and Tim Kennedy. Now, a judge just set a hearing for Thursday over the affidavit that led to the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. Former President Trump wants the release of the, quote, completely unredacted version of that document. But the Justice Department opposes it on the grounds that it may compromise the ongoing criminal investigation and damage national security. Meantime, we are still waiting for the DOJ to respond to the Senate Intelligence Committee's call for more details about why Attorney General Merrick Garland approved the raid in the first place. Plus, there's been some confusion about what was taken during that search. Former President Trump said agents seized 3 of his passports, with CBS initially reporting that wasn't the case. Norah O'Donnell tweeting, according to a DOJ official, the FBI is not in possession of former President Trump's passports. Trump had accused the FBI of stealing his 3 passports during the search. But last night, the FBI said it has now returned those passports to Trump. Kayleigh, so many questions and so many who are quick to report on what eventually we learn is not true in the first place.
Yeah, who was Norah O'Donnell's source? Was it the same individuals feeding all of the information about the Russia investigation, which turned out not to be true? I'd love to know who her sources were. I'd love to know if she held those sources accountable, because we saw the email from the DOJ saying that we swept up the passports. There were 2 that were expired, 1 that was active. They were diplomatic passports, which are given to you in government, par for the course, being the President of the United States. But to me, this speaks to kind of the indiscriminate nature of this search. You had 9.5 hours to rifle through 11 boxes. You had a dozen agents to rifle through the 11 boxes you took. At no point did 12 people searching for nearly 10 hours come across the passports and say, oh, we should leave those here. And this argument that's being proffered that these are diplomatic passports, they can be seized by the government at any time, that's what we call a red herring. Look over here, because the point is the government returned the passports within a week. So the government did not mean or intend to take those passports. I will say, interesting Wall Street Journal piece about Merrick Garland, about how he's a cautious person, how his demeanor as a federal judge is something that he has shed over time. And they write that even with routine matters such as requesting help from foreign governments, he would review in detail these documents that normally you would delegate. And I would just love to know, at what point did he turn from a cautious attorney general who reviewed documents that should have been delegated to an unprecedented raid on a former president? I'd love to know the calculation in his mind. I'd love to know if there were any objections, because I've got to think one person said, hey, this might look political. We need to have a really good reason. We'll wait for the facts to come out, but the bottom line, he should give those documents to Rubio and Warner. And I applaud Democrat Senator Warner for saying, I need to see the documents. So thank you for that bipartisan call. I think America echoes that.
That's right. And Harris, in all of those questions, it also includes sort of how the media is shaping this, to Kayleigh's point. So Trump's spokesperson, Taylor Budovich, said, this is how fake news works, folks. He said the Biden administration actively feeds half-truths and lies that the media willingly amplifies, advancing a partisan narrative to attack Trump. And he went on to say this is a perfect example of how the vital institutions of media and justice are being destroyed from within by the lazy, the corrupt, and the ill intent. Now, obviously, that's his words, but he echoes, frankly, a lot of how Americans are feeling, which is why are these false narratives being amplified so quickly? Is it for the clickbait? Is it to be first to the gate? But then you just have to backtrack and admit that you're wrong for all of our detriment as we wait for the facts.
I think it is clickbait. I think it's all of that. And they're not going to admit that they're wrong. I mean, look how long it took to admit that something that was substantially, something that you could hold in your hands, because someone had, that maintenance worker at the computer shop, the Hunter Biden laptop. They're not going to admit that they were wrong. It's too difficult, apparently. But I want to touch on something you said, because it really speaks to the issue of the power grab here. So you send in your FBI agents, and they just sort of scoop everything up with like a dumpster load of stuff. And then you get back to the office, and you realize, oh, we took attorney-client privilege stuff. Well, your FBI agents and their defense are probably not going to know that. That's what experts have told me. The passport issue might be the same thing, right? they are issued at the, at the governance of the federal government, at the whim, at whatever. But they were returned because they were never supposed to be taken. So that, that grace or whatever it is from the federal government that allows an official to keep them apparently was still in place. But maybe they just scooped all this stuff up. They were told to just get whatever you can. That's why we need to see the affidavit. Because if the affidavit said, get whatever you can, Katie, bar the door for the rest of America. Because that means they can come to your house and get whatever they can.
Yes.
You have to have specificity in order on that affidavit to get the warrant. And I only know that because one of my close friends, Emily, and my other close friend, Kaylee, are both attorneys. The other part that I'll just say very quickly with all of this is the accountability is so rich where it's coming from. The calls from accountability now are coming from the man who was just raided his home, not from the federal government. Why is that?
Great question. Tim, we are so grateful that you're back with us today. What do you make of all this?
It's kind of heartbreaking. I love the rule of law. I love that this country is a nation of laws, but for laws to be real, those laws have to be impartially executed evenly and fairly across, like not race specific, not gender specific, and definitely not party specific. When we start doing that, we lose any moral high ground that we've ever had. And especially in the international community, when people are looking in, we're supposed to be this shining light of truth and justice, right? That's what America is. That's what we stand for. We'll climb cliffs, we'll run up the beaches to fight what's wrong. And when we're doing that in an unfair way, it sets a dangerous precedence, and party specifics where it's a partisan attempt to grab some power. It's very dangerous, and it's bad for the way that the rest of the world looks at America.
It is dangerous, and I think, I have to confess I feel a bit jaded with my background as a criminal attorney, because to me, I'm not surprised at all. The only surprise to me is that it is happening or has happened to a former president, because that level of encroachment and that level of lack of specificity, the level of like, oh, we grabbed this too, oh, sorry, here it is. I mean, I have a million stories of heartbreaking encroachments into average American people, and I think that the people asking now, well, then this is going to happen to us next, it's already happening on a micro and macro scale, frankly.
What if you don't get all your stuff back?
There have been cases from years ago that people still don't have their, all the time. All the time the government
That is so
will
crazy to me.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Wow.
What if you don't? With all that they took, that's another reason you need the specificity on that affidavit. What if there's stuff that they have that is never returned?
That happens all the time. And, remember, technically your passports are the property of the United States government.
Yes.
Think of it as a privilege, not a right. But certainly other personal property, absolutely it's seized by the government and will remain in such for years. I've had clients that are still trying to get their stuff back. Cheryl, your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, what is going on at the FBI? I keep going back to the chaos of this raid, and I know that they've denied that this is a political operation, but we've once again politicized a government agency, and it's a shame to me what's happened to what I think was once a great organization, a great piece of the U.S. government. And this raid has just, I think, shown that they really just don't know what they're doing. And I think that's one of the reasons they don't want the affidavit released, because they're using it, oh, it's national security, oh, we have to protect the witnesses. I think it's because, once again, like we found out with Russiagate, there's not going to be a there. And I think that's what they're more worried about than anything. And yes, I read Merrick Garland gave all this thoughtful time and really contemplated. That raid was not carried out by an agency that gave it careful time and contemplation. It was chaos, and I think we're not going to get anything out of it again. You really want to criminally charge a former president? You really want to go down that road?
Yeah.
Well, it's frightening to me.
We will absolutely see what the investigation uncovers and how the government proceeds with that information, their conclusions. The FBI and the DOJ, frankly, are filled with good men and women doing amazing things and acting honorably every day. But as Trump's spokesperson said, it's up to the remaining good people within these institutions to expose the bad actors and hold them accountable. So the American people have a lot more questions that will hopefully be answered soon.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.